excited and delighted to explore this topic with these three very smart individuals on subjects. Let's start with some quick intros of what you're focused on, and we'll dive deep into the interesting interplay between capital and AI development. Arnav, kick us off.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Arnav. I'm a partner at Bankless Ventures. We're an early-stage crypto venture capital fund.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanne Kim. I'm part of a firm called Fortitude Ventures. We're based here in the Bay Area. We invest in this thesis called autonomy, whether you're automating knowledge work, vertical AI or applied AI, or physical AI, embodied AI, which is robotics.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gurnor. I'm a new member at the investment team at Hashed, which is a global early-stage venture fund.
Again, I'm Jeff Wilser. I host two podcasts on AI, The People's AI, focused on decentralized AI, and a general interest AI podcast called AI Curious. So as a baselining, love your thoughts on kind of largely speaking, how does capital impact the shape of AI development? I know it's an awfully big open-ended question, but how do we get our arms around that? Joanne, what are your thoughts?
So I think AI has really repriced how we value software businesses. What I mean by this, in the last 20 years, venture evolved around zero cost margins. You had margins that were great because when you use a product, it essentially scaled. With AI, every time you use the product, you incur compute cost. And so this has really flipped how we think about pure software businesses. And so AI really makes businesses easier to build, but defensibility really hard because now durability is challenged in terms of like a product that maybe took a year to build, now it takes weeks and maybe even days.
Gunnar, how do you see it?
Well, when we started looking into the space, right, you always look at it from a crypto angle first, I guess. And when approaching that, the easiest analysis to do was how valuable are the moats around the inputs into a new technology, right? And when looking at frontier models and whatnot, it was relatively easy to deduce when all of them kind of took off that data, compute, et cetera, are all very high cost items and inputs to differentiate yourself. And as long as those barriers to entry exist, it's in the incentive set for any developer to continue leveraging high capital to differentiate themselves. And there's no real other alternative. And so I think that's where we kind of saw the lack of decentralized solutions take off as compared to centralized ones, and why we may have sleepwalked into the same world with AI as we have in the past with internet business models. But I'm hopeful and excited.
Not to get ahead of things, it's almost like there was so much kind of a head start decentralized players had, so much capital already invested. There was kind of like not any material real way to be able to catch up at that kind of frontier level. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, capital was the primary motivator to be differentiated and what it funded.
Arnav.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I think the only thing I'll add is just on the relationship between maybe venture capital and AI, in that in venture capital, capital really flows where there is very clear speed and scale. So for the first time, when you see businesses like Cursor or Harvey with growth curves unlike anything we've seen before, and they become unicorns and decacorns in like sub 2-year periods, I think that type of thing will somewhat continue. And obviously, in many cases, we're going to see trade-offs in safety, and we'll see trade-offs in privacy as well. So kind of curious to see how these things play out.
Let's widen the lens a bit and consider even the big frontier models and the players, right? As they are shifting to more focus on like corporate AI, I'm wondering how that changes how AI is developed. To address the elephant in the room, all of these, I'm going to state the extreme obvious, even a layperson perspective here, that OpenAI was founded famously as a nonprofit, is now very much for profit, right? It's obviously a very polarizing subject, and we could debate that for hours and hours, but I think it's fair to say that good chance that the way they're developing AI might be shifted when there's more capital and economic incentives and pressure for revenue and profit. I view that as kind of like an extreme example. How are you guys looking though at how when there is this like focus on having to hit ROI metrics that shifts whether you spend more of your energy on like AGI to benefit humanity versus we need to show third quarter results?
I think it's the easiest analogy to make is early days of Twitter and how you kind of have an open API that anyone could build on top of the network itself being valuable. In this case, the model itself and all that it provides is where value lies. And as you start seeing kind of any application that leverages the infrastructure get valuable, it's in the incentive set for any of these model providers to go and capture that. I think we're seeing the same with every valuable application now integrating stables or payments just because it's valuable enough for them to come in. They own distribution, and so they're able to close that off. Similar to how Twitter in the old days kind of shut off the API and took everything that was necessary. And so I think naturally, no matter how you frame it, you will have these kind of closed off environments develop because it's in their incentive set to do so, which is why I think something as powerful as an AGI-powered future or anything related to inherently personal information should exist on chain. It's just about the market incentives lining up to make sure that happens.
You mentioned incentives, and it's a great word. Can you guys talk a little more about how incentives shift when there's more capital in play? It's fascinating, Joanna. You said that actually kind of upends the usual incentive. So like, oh, you want to show results and build, but actually, like, well, the compute is costly. How else are kind of incentives changing in surprising ways, perhaps?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time in vertical or enterprise AI. Just small anecdote. I think one big reason, with the exception of Anthropic or OpenAI, why we haven't really seen consumer AI applications is the old ads model, like the CPMs just aren't large enough so that they can support a sustainable consumer business today. And so where we found companies with very stable growth is, the biggest question that we've been asking a lot is what is your big moat, or like how do you stay defensible? And it's one, you pick really niche or like deep vertical workflows that you can integrate deeply with, so you can capture proprietary data, which will help you create a better workflow. And I think OpenAI, Anthropic, they've gone into like different verticals. Arnav and I were talking backstage about Harvey, talking about healthcare, and so I think given how fast AI is moving, focus is all you need, right? Attention is all you need. Focus is all you need, and I think we're seeing that the ROI come from these measured outcomes versus just abstract intelligence or like whatever AGI is, and when that does come.
Arnav, your thoughts on incentives?
Yeah, maybe on a slightly different note than that, from a pure venture capital perspective, the thing that's been really interesting is not only how obviously capital impacts AI, but how AI impacts capital. And specifically what I'm talking about is when we're allocating to new early stage startups, and I know every venture capitalist feels this, what are actually the moats? Like a technical moat used to be a real thing. Your ability to ship code really fast used to be like an actual differentiator. Today, now it feels like most things are being commoditized in many ways. So now we value network effects a lot deeper. We value regulatory moats a lot more. We value distribution, having a structural edge in customer acquisition. So actually the presence of AI makes these things a lot more valuable, and I think we index on them a lot heavier. So I think it's an interesting way that actually AI impacts capital allocators.
To get back at the spirit of the title of this session, to me, at core, the real fundamental question is actually, I think, a really powerful one and an important one of, okay, is there almost a misalignment here or an alignment question or issue of we know that companies need capital, and there's like that is no shade. It's understandable. That is reasonable for a company to want capital and reasonable for a company to want to do right by VCs. But I'm guessing the metrics that VCs care about have little to do with like building, quote, good AI or AI that's fair, AI that's aligned with humanity, right? And I'm guessing any spreadsheet you have looking at ROI calculations, column F or column G is not have a variable on human alignment, right? So how do you guys square that? How do you reconcile, or how are you thinking about, okay, all these AI projects need capital, They need to show performance, but they also hopefully want to not be evil. I'm not at all saying money is evil, but you see what I'm getting at, right? This is kind of like there's not really a spreadsheet or metrics on kind of quote good AI. How are you thinking about that larger picture?
Yeah, I'll go. I think any of the larger AI companies and their allocators, I think they think relatively the same way. The larger AI companies, they're thinking about how do we drive growth, how do we drive scale, how do we drive better gross margins, and in return, they will attract more and more capital. And especially as they size up to these $500 billion, trillion-dollar type of data centers, they're going to want to attract these sovereign wealth funds who are going to care more about, is this actually a place I can put my capital? So ultimately, I think the only time in which they're really going to slow down and ask, like, is this for the benefit of humanity, will be if the social layer, it actually says, hey, you guys have taken it too far, and they start actually canceling their subscriptions, or there's a clear impact on the bottom line. So I fundamentally don't believe that any of the large model providers will self-correct without the social layer demanding it.
But we've seen this social, I think it's a great point. I think in Web 2, we've seen a social layer can be very, very quick to mobilize, right? I mean, people look at the sins and original sins of the Facebooks of the world and problems there with social media. It's still, people are like happy to say, here's my data, here's my, just take it, and we don't need to preserve privacy, right? So it's like, I'm not super optimistic that billions of people will kind of like mobilize in any meaningful way the social layer. But sorry, not a question. That's just my own confession of a concern there. Joanne, how are you seeing this? How are you seeing? I know it's a complicated set of issues here, but how are you seeing that?
Yeah. I think on one layer, but from where Arnav was speaking, on the application level, I don't think that AI is I don't think that humanity is at odds with AI. I actually think it's great. I think it's good for all of us. Autonomy will create time. I think AI, whether it's physical AI or knowledge work AI, it's replacing a lot of these, very expensive or scarce or risky jobs. For example, in body air robotics, one of our LPs in Korea, as you know, is facing a big aging population problem, and so for them, finding great labor is a very hard task. And so they welcome these solutions because they're having to move their factories closer to the cities. And the average age of a lot of these workers in these factories are in their mid-50s. And so I actually think small steps for one big step into mankind, meaning like I don't think this Terminator AGI threat will be in the near term. Obviously, AI is overestimated in the short term, underestimated in the long term, but I don't think it's at odds, and I think a lot of the applications that we're seeing today are actually very helpful for what the different problems and tasks that humans are facing today.
And so I'm not a Skynet doomer Terminator guy either. But there is, I think, the tension between like the economic incentives for speed versus thoughts of safety, and to what extent how that plays out, who knows? So in our prep, you mentioned the idea that speed can monetize faster, right? And there are certain things that are easier to have paybacks on. How has that changed? Even putting aside the Skynet world, right, and back to kind of like planet Earth and reality, how has that shifts where we focus our energy on AI? When it's true that monetization that's quicker might be more attractive to VCs, where does that kind of over-index or under-index the space?
Well, really quick on your previous point, I think the market is the best determinant for what's best and what people want, right? I mean, we can theorize all we want, but at the end of the day, what people are paying for are what people use. I think DeFi is a great example, actually, as an analogy. And we're very early for anything internet or AI based too. In finance as an industry has been structurally inefficient for a while. DeFi came in as an open standard, as a competitor that made it more efficient, and the market moved to that solution, and we see it moving on chain, which is why people claim that blockchain is inherently a financial solution. Well, it's because it's solving a structurally broken issue. And I think at some point, the market's going to wake up to the fact that if we've been inherently personal with internet models so far, and now you have AI models that are becoming even more personal, there's a limit at which we stop. And hopefully open standards, kind of take the baton from there. It just takes time.
No, that's a great point. And we are legally required to, we have not yet mentioned AI agents in 15 minutes, and that's a penalty here on me. Let's talk discoverability. I think Winnie made an excellent point earlier in our prep that not enough folks are talking about how agents will be discovered and potentially discovered by other agents, and maybe how that could influence where capital is going and how AI is being built. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can go. I think the agent discoverability thing is super interesting. We were actually talking backstage, and obviously we had like an app store moment a long time ago, and that became the canonical discovery for iOS applications, and that built many multiple billions of dollar businesses. Likewise, I think on the agent front, we're likely to see single interfaces that kind of collapse most of a human's financial interactions. And I think how that impacts the entire supply chain is very interesting. A great example right now, you go on Expedia or Kayak to book your trips. They have a lot of pricing power. They do overcharge you because they know they can, because you're so familiar with their interface. They have rewards, there's lock-in, all that fun stuff. But if you're actually booking a trip through this interface instead, that agent is going to go out and find whichever intermediary is going to give you the best pricing basically on that trip, and that's great for the end consumer. So I think net, it's going to lead to better outcomes for the consumer, and I do believe that most financial interactions will collapse around one interface. And I think if you look at somebody like Vlad from Robinhood, he's like very cognizant of all of the new things that I guess younger folks in particular are looking to do, whether it's trade stocks, options, prediction markets. I don't think it's crazy they add an agentic interface and people spend most of their time there sooner than later.
So we went from destroying humanity to better for the consumer. So it's a huge win already. We're already more optimistic here. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, there are trade-offs, right? Again, like privacy is not going to be by default.
Yeah.
Guardrails are still necessary. That's not going to be default. But people are willing to trade speed and scale and for monetization wherever possible.
I'm glad you mentioned privacy. I think it's actually a much more, to Joanne's point, we don't need to be talking about the end of civilization, the scary stuff, to kind of see some real world impacts of possible misalignment. What steps can the space take to ensure that privacy is not something sacrificed or lost in the pursuit of capital, and how AI is being built to get capital?
People have just gotten used to efficiency over privacy, if anything, and so it's just going to be a market reaction to when people wake up to that fact. And I think there's some allocative efficiency to be found between models that are good enough to be run in an open source manner, and you have to take the conscious decision to route your requests that way or your preferences that way. And if they're more permissionless or cheaper to do, then it becomes a natural go-to for people. And in all honesty, in the near future, I don't really see privacy being a make or break for people who just want to get the job done.
Sadly, I completely agree with you. Joanne, do you want to chime in there?
I guess one last thought would be, discoverability really is a distribution problem. I think agents don't have the UI issue that humans do, and so a lot of brand and UI are qualities that are going to be eroded. When I think about how a lot of the problems that AI agents are solving are very obvious, and there's a demand and large need, and so it's going to be about really controlling the distribution channels. And unfortunately, I do think a lot of the incumbents are well positioned for that. So if you're a startup builder, you're going to have to think about some unique ways to sort of wedge yourself into these distribution channels. But I think a lot about distribution when I think about discoverability.
You mentioned metrics earlier. Would love to hear about, I'm actually really fascinated by this, how AI feels like a really hard thing to figure out, how and where and when to claim yes, success or not, right? It's being a VC, being an investor. I'm sure it's always complicated to figure out, okay, for the early stage, where do we define this is working, not working, and so on. Like, what metrics are most essential to you guys right now, and how has it shifted? And I'm wondering how it tacks back to like deciding how AI is being built. Arnav, what for you? What's the not to share your entire investor playbook, but to the extent you're allowed to chime in at a general level, like what types of metrics? How is, or maybe I'll ask it differently, how are AI metrics different from more kind of traditional, conventional metrics?
Yeah, I understand. Obviously, in the AI front, we're seeing a lot of explosive growth super quickly. I think quantifying the quality of that revenue is actually super difficult, right?
Yeah.
And also, again, the inference costs are super high, so CPM matters a lot as well. So again, I don't invest purely in AI stuff, so I'm not best qualified to answer that. But yeah, it's completely different, and I know for a fact a lot of my friends who are investing in pure AI, evaluating the quality and the durability and the scalability of that revenue is increasingly difficult, especially when a lot of things have pretty serious growth curves coming out the gate, and it's very difficult to determine whether that's going to expand or not.
And to Joanne's point, the kind of paradox is it could be they're getting real traction, but inference costs are so high, they're bleeding money. You're like, oh, is this good or is this bad? It must be a little complicated as an investor to judge that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, no, it's super hard for sure. Yeah. On the flip side, I wasn't sure on the question, but like the only metric that VCs care about is DPI. How much money did you return to your investors?
Yeah. Gunnar, how about yourself?
I think there's a kind of a notional value of creativity attached to each of these startups because, again, being in the crypto space, you kind of make analogies back, and I think there's certain conflationary trends going on with what people are building in the AI space right now and how liquidity used to hop around in the early days of DeFi when you had one protocol and you have the code open sourced, and so a competitor would build a slightly better version. You kind of have a similar dynamic of AI tools being used, and then of course the looming threat that OpenAI or any model provider kind of either turns off the spigot or just vertically integrates that use case. So I think there's this notional value of creativity, which makes essentially the question is how hard is your company replicable?
Yeah.
How hard is it to replicate? And
back to moat, right? Is
Exactly.
almost a creative moat in a sense.
Essentially, it's like, are you applying the models in a way which is creative enough such that it can stand on its own and there isn't like a fundamental dependency on the base layer? Much easier, much harder said than done.
Yeah. As we wrap up, would love some predictions from you all on how this shakes out. And you can take that however you'd like, but broadly speaking, on the intersection of capital and AI and how AI is being developed. Time frame of your choice. Could be a month from now, could be 20 years from now, dealer's choice. Arnav, any predictions for the future here?
Yeah, I don't know how many people read, there was a very recent article that Citrini wrote on Twitter, like 50 million views this past weekend actually. And it was like, looking back, we're in 2028, 2030, looking back, how have things changed? And I think maybe over a longer term horizon, not even that long, like 5 to 8 years, I think this is the first time where technology will displace jobs, but not create an equivalent amount. And I think the way that impacts the economy will be super interesting because it also, increases the gross margins for corporations. It does decrease the amount of marginal buyers, and that obviously creates a new paradigm in which we have to, settle for. So I guess that's my prediction.
Interesting is a very euphemistic word right there. Joanne.
I agree with both of what they said. I think more than like knowledge work AI, I'm really interested to see how embodied AI or robotics sort of permeates their lives. At Fortitude, we were thinking a lot about like, what does the future look like? Is it humanoids where your humanoid robot that was doing dishes and cooking you food, stepping out to drive your car? Probably not. It's probably going to be a lot of like these specialized robots where a Waymo or a Tesla drives you in the car, and then you have specific robots for making food or like cleaning the house. And so I'm sort of excited for what is going to be happening after the next unlock, when the hardware starts to enter the picture. And so, excited to speak with anybody in the audience also who has ideas in this physical embodied space as well.
And Bill, I agree with both your, and Arnav, agree with your prediction as well. For better or worse, I agree with you. Gunnar, final thoughts on predictions.
In the short term, I think what DeFi did for financial expressivity, AI tools are doing for creativity or expressivity with building. And so while building in the crypto blockchain space seems very negative EV right now, I think we're very optimistic actually, because now anyone has the power and the tools to continue building, and the barriers of entry have just gotten lower. The area in which they express that in is open to them, but crypto and blockchain can be a very valuable place to express that interest. Down the line, I think my very long-term view is that we live in a world where privacy is inherent, and you have user-owned data, which is transferable, and now memory and intelligence become even more inherently personal. So that is also transferable between services, and we hold control of it. Do I think that's happening anytime soon? Probably not. I think we're sleepwalking into yet another iteration of internet-owned business model.
Love your long-term vision. A prediction of mine here, I think we'll see more capital shifting into robots, but not necessarily humanoid robots, more specialized robots that will become more and more mainstream in the future. On that note, we're out of time. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you, guys.